The history of 2011, of course, seems to divide equally into two parts. Those times when the Republican front leader has just fallen, and those times when he's about to fall. Romney vaguely over the summer, then it was Bachmann, then it was Perry, then it was Kaine. It's Gingrich now. So that begs the question, who's next? Ron Paul? We'll ask Ken Vogel, chief investigative reporter with Politico. Good evening, Ken.
Hey, Keith.
All right, I posited Congressman Paul, obviously, because of the Des Moines Register poll, which has Gingrich 25, Paul 18, Romney 16. Is it in fact Paul now in the always filled GOP on deck circle?
Well, as Paul would say, it's not just his moment, it's been his decade. That's sort of the self-braggadocious thing that he said on Sunday when asked about his surge in the polls in Iowa. And while I don't think I would go quite that far, you could definitely make the case that Ron Paul, perhaps more than any of the other candidates in this race, has influenced this race and the positions taken in this race and the focus of this race through his just unswerving focus on fiscal issues and his hardcore libertarianism over the course of his career in Congress. In many ways, you could argue that he not only fathered the Tea Party, but he has at least influenced the initial stages of this race to the point where you have other candidates talking about abolishing departments of the agencies, cabinet-level agencies of the United States government, even if they can't remember quite as many as Ron Paul can remember. And there's definitely the possibility that he could finish in the top 3 in Iowa, and that would really shake up the race.
Does he, however, fit the profile of in terms of the culture wars and the so-called societal issues that really have fueled such a large percentage of previous Republican frontrunners?
No, not at all. And for that reason, he probably has a hard cap on how far he can go. He's not going to win the nomination, but he could really stir things up. And more than that, he could potentially cause some trouble as a third-party candidate. We saw in 2008 when he ran and really generated this enthusiasm on the fiscal right of the Republican Party and got a lot of young people involved for the first time. When the possibility was raised of him running as a libertarian, he kind of begged off. This time, I don't think he has as much to lose. He's getting up there in age. He's probably not going to run for president again in 4 years. And so I think that the possibility of running as a third-party candidate, perhaps as a libertarian, could be tempting for him. And if he does, it will be a serious problem for Republicans.
All right, but let's say he doesn't have to go that route, and Gingrich falls, as we suspect he might, and Ron Paul is the guy who moves in there, and for some reason the majority of those voters in the caucuses and in the early primaries likes him, and he's in contention. Is there the proverbial path to the nomination for him if he wins Iowa? Does he then have a shot in New Hampshire, or where does he stand? South Carolina, Florida, and the other places moving forward?
New Hampshire, possibly, if he pulled off a shocker in Iowa, and make no mistake about it, it would be a shocker, even though he is really made some headway there and has more of an organization than he did in 2008 when he finished in 5th place with 10% of the vote there. It would be a shocker if he won Iowa. If that happened, conceivably, yeah, he might have a chance in New Hampshire. It gets a lot harder for him after that once you get into the states where, as you mentioned, there's a greater focus on social issues as opposed to fiscal or more libertarian portfolio issues. I just don't see him having a path to the nomination.
All right, we should probably work off the assumption that Gingrich is not going to last, but he, for all we know, he's pre-scandaled, he's pre-disastered, like the infamous house in the World According to Garp movie that they buy after the plane flies into it. But if Gingrich falls and it isn't Ron Paul, or it's only Ron Paul temporarily, Rick Santorum seems to think it's going to be Rick Santorum. He seems to think he's going to win Iowa. Is that crazy, or is it plausible in the very crazy, heavy Republican nominating process so far?
He could definitely get a bump, and we could see a peak for him. I don't think he'll win Iowa. I think possibly Rick Perry might even have more of a chance of it. He's still languishing in the single digits in the polls there. But if he were to somehow be able to get a bump at the right time and win Iowa, then I think he could have more of a chance of fighting it out with Mitt Romney in a prolonged Republican primary along the lines of what we saw on the Democratic side in 2008 between then-Senators Obama and Clinton. I don't necessarily think that Newt Gingrich would be well-suited for such a long primary because he simply doesn't have the infrastructure. Ron Paul, ditto. Rick Santorum, same thing. I really think that if Romney is able to pull away in Iowa and New Hampshire, then it's his for the taking. If not, then perhaps Newt Gingrich, if the stars align for him, has a chance. Perry maybe less so, but I think the stars are starting to align for Mitt Romney here.
But if there have been 4 lead changes and you're still stuck in third place, you might have 44 lead changes and still be stuck in third place. Well, we'll see if Mr. Romney has more to him in the future. Ken Vogel of Politico, as ever, kind enough to give some of his time this evening. Thank you as always, Ken.
My pleasure, Keith.
We did not gloss over Gingrich's meeting of the egos with Donald Trump today in New York. Maysoon Zayed joins me later in the news hour to rubberneck at that car wreck. But first, it's Occupy and the irony of the unpaid taxes by the owners of Zuccotti Park. Plus, Occupy trying to save the home of a victimized family in upstate New York. Those stories next. This is Countdown.